Hello and welcome to this episode of Pasadena Media's On the Move podcast. My name is Alan Clelland. I'm a member of the board and vice president of the board of Pasadena Media, and I'm a 24-year resident of the city of Pasadena. I'm pleased to be the host of this, the seventh of Pasadena Media's On the Move podcasts, exploring mobility issues in the city of Pasadena. Our goal is to provide information to our community on current issues of interest, present new ideas, and take an occasional look at Pasadena's history and so how we got here. This month's episode will focus on safety on the roads of Pasadena. Safety in the city in general, of course, is a major responsibility of the city's police department, the PD, and I'm very pleased to have as my guest this month, Lieutenant Anthony Russo. Tony, welcome to the On the Move podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Could we please start by focusing on you personally, your background, responsibilities within the PD, and how they relate to road safety?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been with the police department now. It's going to be 20 years in December. I was hired in 2004. I've worked a variety of assignments. I was promoted to lieutenant about 6 years ago. And I currently oversee the traffic division of the Pasadena Police Department, which has several different unique responsibilities to include traffic safety, but also community engagement. I have graduated from North Central University with a doctorate in Homeland Security, and that plays a role in some of the responsibilities that I have. I also oversee our SWAT program and our firearms training program, so that can get me pretty busy. But the primary job is traffic safety and traffic engagement within the city right now.
Excellent. That's quite a range of activities there.
It is.
Well, thanks, Tony. So in your day-to-day work, what do you see as the main factors impacting the safety of road users in general in Pasadena? And I'm talking about pedestrians, cyclists, as well as drivers and transit users.
Well, Pasadena is one of those destinations that has a very unique structure in that you have everything. You don't just have, one specific idea. Like we have a very large working community and community that comes, so you get very high levels of congestion. You have very close off-ramps and freeway that runs right through the center of the city. You end up with your public transportation with our metro rail that comes through the city and then also intersects at several streets within our city and runs underground before it continues back between the freeway directions. So you have bicyclists, e-bikes, scooters, pedestrians. I mean, you name it, we have it. And with a community like we have, you have the ability to utilize, those are actually functional. So people use a lot of our transportation opportunities, whether it's not just driving, they'll walk places. And so we have a lot of opportunity for mobility.
And are there any particular factors that you notice on a regular basis that impact safety? I mean, I know driving around in Pasadena as a resident, I'm concerned sometimes about the speed that vehicles drive.
Yeah, so the primary things that we're looking at safety-wise, safety is our number one. Like if we look at the primary collision factor of the crashes that we respond to in any given year, unsafe speed is historically the number one, the leading cause. And that's very closely followed by either right-of-way violations, so a vehicle not properly yielding a turn or taking a turn that they shouldn't take, so someone believes they have the right-of-way when they actually don't. So there's confusion between the two operators. You typically see that when you have a left turn collision, is the person making the left turn needs to yield to oncoming traffic. And then also improper turning, so bad turning, maneuvering, and or failing to obey signs. Typically when, the Department of Transportation engages with a sign that says, hey, don't turn between a specific hour or time, or don't turn on red. The reason for that is because the speed of the vehicles and or the visibility of the vehicles to allow you to merge into traffic wouldn't be safe. And so that's why those controls are present. They're not always sought or understood right away when the street is designed. These are things that develop over time, and then Department of Transportation will look at that and say, how can we make this better? And that may be implementing a turning time frame and or eliminating the ability for someone to make a turn.
Oh, so that's an example of how speed increasing actually changes the use of the road and makes it more dangerous. And not just driving on any road at a higher speed, but that affects the safety of the road itself and the road design.
Well, yes, the road design is designed for a certain speed, and that's obviously something that they look at to determine what is the speed that this road should be traveled upon, which is where you get your speed limits set as a safe kind of go-by speed. The issue with speed, though, is every time that you increase that speed, you're reducing your ability to perceive and react to changes in the roadway that may happen in front of you, and then also stop. And so that's why with increased speed, you see reduced ability to react and perceive instances where changes, if somebody does fail to yield, or if a child runs out in the street chasing a ball or a pet or something along those lines. People drive roads, typically we're creatures of habit. And so we drive kind of the same routes. We expect things to be the same, but this is real world and things change day to day. And so inattention and getting on your cell phone and doing other things have caused the ability with the increased speed to now increase the time it takes to perceive something, a threat, and then to react to that and take adverse reactions or to avoid it. And so then you end up with a collision.
Yeah, you mentioned things change. Has speed changed over the recent years?
I think what we have seen is that speeding, I get a lot of complaints. The police department fields a lot of complaints about speed throughout the city. Those complaints come in, whether it's via straight to us through our website portal, through the city of Pasadena's ability to report problems. They can come from city council members that are hearing from people in their district. I work with the district liaisons. They can come from DOT. But speed is one of the common factors. And when we look at streets, we typically see that people are driving, for the most part, the speed limit. But there are outliers in every situation. And even the people driving the speed limit, what we've seen are the fact that vehicles have increased in their ability to accelerate. Electric vehicles have been introduced, and their ability to accelerate is, even though they may just go over the speed limit or go to the speed limit, they're reaching the speed limit at a quicker pace. And so they're traveling at those speeds for a longer time during their travels.
That's a good point.
And then it means you're traveling at those speeds for a longer duration. If something happens, again, it comes down to the ability to perceive and then stop that vehicle or maneuver the vehicle around the obstruction.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. What about pedestrian and bike safety in particular?
Well, I mean, pedestrian and bike safety is an important thing for us because you have to understand, right, is when you get in a car crash, you're surrounded by metal. In most cases, these cars have pretty robust safety features for crashes. When you're on a bicycle, you're on a motorcycle, or you're a pedestrian, you don't have those safety features. And so it's not so much the speed that is what is injuring or killing people. It's that sudden stop. It's the person, the body colliding with an immovable object or a heavier object. And so, pedestrians, cyclists, the vulnerable mobility community, they're at risk anytime they're walking next to a roadway because you're traveling, their vehicle's traveling 30 miles an hour, 6,000-pound vehicle.
And they're getting bigger.
And they're getting heavier. The electric vehicles are not light vehicles. And so that means they take longer to stop, and yet they accelerate faster than their, gas brethren. So those are things that we have to look at, that we engage with education and our safety operations through partnerships that we have. The majority of our fatalities this year have involved motorcyclists or pedestrians.
Really?
Majority. And if you're involved in crashes or you have crashes that have pedestrians and motorcyclists, you're going to see a higher likelihood of fatality, especially if the speed is above 25 miles per hour. Yeah. Because any collision with a pedestrian or motorcyclist in excess of 25 miles an hour, it exponentially increases the likelihood that individual will be seriously injured or killed just 5 to 10 miles an hour faster. And the likelihood of surviving being struck by a vehicle traveling over 45 is less than 10%, I think.
Absolutely. There was a change in the statewide law for jaywalking. Was it earlier on this year or last year?
2023.
2023.
Yeah, saw California adopt the Freedom to Walk Act.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you notice has there been any significant change in the pedestrian?
So I think it's probably too early to tell for the data California wide. I know for Pasadena, we have not seen, we haven't attributed any of our fatal crashes or injuries to pedestrians as a result of people jaywalking. There's a couple. None of the fatalities were. All of the serious injury crashes or fatalities, the individuals were in crosswalks, either marked or unmarked crosswalks. And so those are things that we look at. I think the issue with the Freedom to Walk Act is most people, the pedestrian is careful to cross the roadway in the sense that they realize they're not crossing at a crosswalk, so you don't have the illusion of safety with the red light. So the pedestrian is actually safer. They're more attentive, crossing where they don't have control signals.
More engaged in the action. Yeah.
The issue then is that the driver, though, is not necessarily paying attention to that part of the roadway because they're not used to seeing a pedestrian or expecting a pedestrian to cross in that section. So, and with the distractions that we deal with, with people doing cell phone usage and non-hands-free devices, they're more likely to have a near miss or have a collision with that. But we haven't seen a great increase in those types of collisions.
Now, another one of the sort of changing aspects of using the road is an increase, and you mentioned electric bikes, but scooters, and various propelled devices that you can stand on. Yeah, I noticed one today, single wheel device on a sidewalk, traveling at a heck of a speed. Is that legal, or that kind of use of the sidewalk by bikes and other?
So riding a bicycle or certain e-bikes on the sidewalk is legal. The only places that it is not legal is where it's specifically designated that you can't, and that's Lake District, South Lake District, and Old Town Pasadena have PMC code, municipal code sections that prohibit the use of cycles and whatnot on the sidewalk. So for the most part, you can cycle on the sidewalk. You're supposed to do it safely and not in excess of great speeds. Driving on the sidewalk or riding on the sidewalk at 20 something miles an hour is dangerous for pedestrians and the cyclists. So the other thing is you have multiple different classes of those e-bikes, and so we're seeing you have to understand, and my conversation or my advice to those that have them is understand what class e-bike you're on and what the requirements are, because a class 3 bike requires a helmet at all times, not just under certain conditions. And so having the multiple classes and different speeds kind of change the dynamic with that. And it's another thing that we get complaints about with people riding on the sidewalk and not being respectful to the pedestrians or sharing the walkway in those areas where it is legal. And, we receive complaints about that, but have not attributed a ton of injuries or collisions or crashes to cyclists or scooters on the sidewalk.
Oh, well, that's good in itself. Are there any other positive notes, positive trends that you've seen?
Well, I mean, we haven't, Pasadena hasn't had to deal with, a lot of road rage incidents or some of the other things that you kind of see in the news about, impatience and inattention and things like I haven't seen an uptick in any of that. I also think that, when we look at our, traffic stats and we start looking at our crash data from, now until like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, because the pandemic really kind of signified a change in driving behavior. And that's nationally. If you look at the National Highway Transportation and NHTSA and the reports that they have from dating all the way back to like 2017 and fatalities, is you lead all the way up to 2020 in the pandemic. And 2019 had seen far fewer crashes than what you saw in 2020. And there was a large spike in fatalities during the pandemic. And in part, that is likely because there's less vehicles on the roadway and that speed increases. And anytime we talk about speed, again, it's like for the motorcycle riders out there, one of the things we're taught in the Motor Academy, and I ride a motorcycle here with the police department and personally, is you want to scrub speed as fast as you can if you're about to get in a crash, because every mile you take off is going to help minimize how much damage you could incur. And so I think people got comfortable driving fast during the pandemic without the cars on the road. We saw more significant crashes and a higher fatality rate nationwide, not so much in Pasadena. But we also have seen those levels remain post-pandemic. And so we still are not down to the crash levels that we were pre-pandemic in the relations to nationwide fatality stats or just crash stats in general. There was a drop in 2023, and that was the first drop after 3 years of steady increases.
Oh, okay. So it did drop last year.
Yes, slightly nationwide.
Well, that's a good
from
sign.
From the year prior, but still higher than
it was before
2019. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So looking into the future, then, looking into your crystal ball here, what do you see as factors improving road safety?
Well, I think partnerships is a big one. We're going to continue to partner with our stakeholders in the community. I engage with Day One members over there.
You do? Yes.
Yeah, they'll call over about crashes that they're heard about that involved cyclists. And so they've taken an interest, and we've met with them. We also partner with the Office of Traffic Safety with California. And so that gives us, like this year, we were awarded $595,000 to use for safety programs, education programs, and necessary equipment that we need. And so from that, we were able to buy speed trailers that help us with getting the messaging out regarding speed. We have data recorders that allow us to collect data regarding speeding in any particular area. And so that will allow us to look at an entire week-long span, 24 hours a day, to kind of really analyze what is the driving behavior like on that particular part of the roadway, and when would the most effective time for us to actually provide enforcement, so we can get windows from that. So we're using smarter analytical tools to provide directed enforcement throughout the city to try and combat some of that reckless behavior or speeding behavior that is going on. I also think you'll see the increase in autonomous driving take more prolific role in safety, and as that becomes more prevalent, there are plenty of reports out there that taking the vehicle away from the human error factor can make things safer. They did this with the aircraft by installing traffic collision avoidance systems, in the 80s, and they can do the same thing with vehicles. It's just there's plenty more vehicles, and so it's a slower process. But I think those things are all coming down
through, yes,
the pipeline. And so, and then ultimately, you could end up seeing geofencing and other features that they apply to the vehicle to prevent the car from being able to go faster than a specific speed in certain areas. Yes. And so there's talks about legislation that may change how they do that in the future. And how
that's in the U.S. here? Is that being considered in the United States for nationally?
I'm not familiar with
speed of the vehicle.
I think these are all, like you're saying, think as far out as possible, and I think those conversations are probably having, but I couldn't point you to any particular place to say, hey, go read about it here, or go look at it here. I just think that when you look at everything we're doing with technology, real-time intelligence and AI, that is something that will get incorporated into vehicles because of the amount of injuries and fatalities that occur every single year. You add into that drinking, and we haven't talked about impairment, but impairment is a huge factor also. And so we focus heavily on enforcing the laws against driving impaired, buzz driving. A lot of people think they're okay. We have a program that we do with OTS called Know Your Limit. And it's where we have officers that go out to the bars here in Old Town, and they take breathalyzers with them, and they go in and they educate the bar patrons about the effects of alcohol. They ask them, do you think you could drive right now? How drunk do you think you are? And then we let them breathalyze themselves to actually see what their blood alcohol content is in that moment. And most people are absolutely shocked at the level of alcohol that they have in their blood when they take the test.
Yeah, that people don't know how long it stays in your body as well.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of hours to get rid of your last drink of alcohol there. Yeah. I had a Tesla for a few years, and I realized that the Tesla was actually sending data up to be collected by Tesla, mainly for maintenance purposes. But it was very handy when there was a problem with the car because they could pinpoint what had changed in the car. Does that data become available to you in the case of a crash, that you get access to look at that?
So
try and figure out what happened during the event?
It can. It requires a search warrant. Like, the information just isn't shared. But typically when you're utilizing or investigating a fatal crash, you have some level of potential criminality there that would allow you to investigate those things. Yeah. So additional equipment that we have are data recorders that allow us to download the vehicles. The other thing that's happened with cars is they've become so much smarter. They have all this black box information. Mm-hmm. So the vehicle knows the position of the pedal at the time of the crash, how much acceleration was actually going on. The gyroscopics of the vehicle can tell us, yaw rates, or what the car was actually dynamically going through during the crash, how fast it decelerated, how fast was it going at the time of impact. So like in the event of the crash that we had here recently in the city, it involved a Tesla, and it involved multiple fatalities. And the car, we were able to determine from a multitude of resources that the vehicle was traveling over 100 miles per hour on the city street prior to striking the curb, and that the vehicle recorded the moment that the collision occurred and the secondary collision when the vehicle struck the building, and how fast the car was traveling through the air when it hit the building. That's how smart the system is. And then, yes, that is downloaded to the cloud or uploaded to the cloud, and we can get search warrant information to get that.
And presumably it's not just Teslas these days. There's more and more cars coming on the road.
And dash cams are become much more prevalent. Well, of course, yeah. We had a very, just this past weekend, we were working a checkpoint, and we got called out from a severe crash, a near fatal collision that occurred over here on Alan and or San Gabriel and Delmar. And that individual had a dash cam in his car, and it helped us to determine who was at fault and exactly what happened. And so we were able to determine that the other party ran a stale red light and then struck the driver that was going through with a green. And so that's kind of where I tell you the illusion of safety and what happens at intersections. What's dangerous? Well, going through an intersection can be dangerous because there is no protective barrier. Yes. It's a light. And if the person is speeding, running the light, and you're not cognizant of what's going on, then you can get broadsided. We've had fatalities that have ended terribly with vehicles like that. And when you have a car traveling 100 miles an hour, it's going over 150 feet per second. Yeah. You're not going to be able to perceive. That car is going to look so far away when you go, I can make the turn. And then, that car's right on you in a couple of seconds. And then at those speeds, the consequences are just catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to some extent, the city's Department of Transportation shares responsibility with you for road safety in Pasadena. How do you work together?
So, a lot of people will talk about the 3 E's: education, enforcement, engineering. Department of Transportation is great. Like, our city is very interconnected. We have something like over 150 or probably more than that cameras over intersections that allow them to look at traffic in real time. They don't record data, but they do allow them to monitor intersections when there's issues, congestion, traffic.
And they're used for traffic control at the intersection with the traffic signals, yeah.
And then they're able to change timing on the lights. So like when we have a large scale event, we'll work with our traffic management team to change the phasing on the lights to help us get people in and out of the bowl more efficiently during those times. So that can involve leaving the light light on green longer. It can involve moving the lights to flash so that we can actually direct traffic during those events, because we're moving 60,000 people in and out of an event. It's a large scale thing, and we're able to do that in a couple of hours with the right tools. DOT I meet with monthly. And so the Department of Transportation, we have regular meetings, and then also open line of communication. So when their team gets wind of an issue or they have a question about engineering problem that they're looking at, then they'll reach out to me so that we can have our team go out and evaluate it as well, to determine, again, if there's education or enforcement that can go into helping that problem to make their engineering changes more robust.
Excellent. That sounds like a high degree of cooperation between the two departments.
Yes, and they're great to work with.
Excellent. Anything that you wanted to add about going out to the community? You talked about the funding that you get from the state to enable you to interact with the community.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things that some people may not know about, like the traffic section, is we're kind of like the utility knife of the department. The wheel and arrow, like that is on the
I noticed that on
our signal, and yes. Every department has wings or wheel and arrow, but the whole purpose behind this is talking about like the motion and the precision of a motor unit, in the sense that we can get through and into areas that are more difficult for other types of vehicles that are larger, and so because of that, we're mobile. And anytime there's a community event, they'll reach out, and our guys will go out, engage with the community, and take that opportunity to either have coffee with a cop or end up at some other school event where walk to school day, or one of these things that is going on, that we can go out and talk to the kids, talk to parents, talk to the community about bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, pass out information and handouts that we get through OTS and our partnership with them, and again, just continue that education part. The other thing that I think our guys do really well at, that I would want the public to know, is, there are no quotas. I think people get confused, and I know that most of the encounters that people have with a law enforcement officer are likely during a traffic stop for some minor traffic violation, and we're trying to educate and deter behavior. Not everybody needs to get a ticket because they made a minor driving violation. Mm-hmm. The habitual offenders and the egregious ones do, but there are times where our guys take the spirit of the law into account and will issue warnings and have a longer discussion with those individuals to not hit the pocketbook so hard. But we document those encounters so that there's a record of how many warnings or times somebody has been talked to, so that if we're getting the same excuse over and over again, and it's the same violation, then we're able to take that a step further, because we do want to incorporate education and community building and have a positive interaction with the public, and not just always that negative connotation of I'm getting stopped and I'm going to get a ticket. It's going to cost me money, and I got to go to traffic school.
Well, I think that's an excellent point at which to stop our discussion here, Tony. Well, thank you very, very much for joining me for this very informative episode on this critical issue of road safety. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the audience for joining us on this episode, and would encourage you to follow the podcasts in future episodes of On the Move. Thank you.